All right, Mike, your thoughts on the settlements of 20 of these cases?
Not surprised, Daniel, because ultimately, when I look at these cases, I think it made a lot of sense for Deshaun Watson to settle at some point because what I would say, looking at it from a legal standpoint, these were claims that were not going to be easy to get rid of at really any stage of the process, whether it was early or on summary judgment. And so Deshaun was in a situation where, in terms of his football career and trying to mitigate a suspension, although I don't know if this will do that, I just think he was in a situation where, if you look at where the courts are in Harris County, I don't know if they could have tried these cases before maybe 2024. And I feel like the more time and money that was poured into this, the worse it would be for Watson. And I think there were ultimately, Daniel, there were risks on both sides, both for Deshaun Watson and the plaintiffs, the alleged victims, of going to trial. And in this kind of situation, I always thought that settlement was the most likely resolution at some point, and now it comes before the end of June.
It seems like the timeline on this has been a little expedited, if you will, because the season is right around the corner. You know, Rusty Hardner. First, Deshaun says he wasn't going to settle because he wants to clear his name. Then Rusty comes out and says, well, the NFL wants to see this resolved before the season started. And, you know, every party involved wants to see that, especially when it comes to football terms. Do you get that sense that this has kind of been expedited a little bit here in the last few weeks?
I want to make a couple of points. I would say yes in general, because it always surprised me, Daniel, that the Miami Dolphins, now to be fair, this was when the criminal liability was still open back in the fall of 2021. Remember, Miami made it a condition of the trade that Deshaun would settle all the lawsuits that were ongoing at that time, plus have non-disclosure agreements. Whereas Cleveland took sort of an opposite tack to where they gave up all the picks plus the guaranteed contract. And they didn't make Deshaun Watson, as far as we know, try to settle those cases back in March. So that was a distinction. There's also a discovery deadline on these cases at the end of this month. And as people like to say, deadlines spur action. And so I think that discovery deadline played into it as well. And another point I definitely want to make, Daniel, because I see a lot of this in my Twitter mentions. This is not a commentary on the evidence, which I haven't really seen. I know about as much about the evidence as everybody listening or watching right now does. But settlements are not admissions of liability. I think without making it into a judgment, it's really for Watson and also the plaintiffs. It's in some ways a financial calculation. You know, how much is it going to cost to go the next year or two trying to battle these out in courts versus trying to get some amount of money that's guaranteed right now?
So, final question I do have to ask you is about his playing future. You alluded to it. You don't think it's going to, one way or another, sway how many games he's suspended, if he's suspended, all that, because I feel like the NFL is really into their investigation at this point. So, what do you expect will happen from the league's perspective when it comes to Deshaun Watson here in the next month and a half?
Daniel, before what's happened the last couple of weeks, the HBO Real Sports story, the New York Times story, the 2 additional lawsuits, I was thinking a pretty broad range of, let's say, 4 to 10 games. But the way the wind is blowing on this, I feel like there is a real chance that we might be looking at a full season suspension. But I would put, my over-under at around 10 and a half games. I think what's happened in the last couple of weeks, while it should be a surprise to nobody who has followed this story the last 13, 15 months or so, but it seems to have swayed the court of public opinion. Roger Goodell famously almost lost his job a couple of years ago because of the insufficient suspension of Ray Rice. I think that plays into it. And therefore, I think the Deshaun Watson suspension will be longer rather than shorter. So I'm thinking 10 games, 12. And I do think a full season, a full year is actually in play.